A man who worked as an informer for the FBI during the 1960s. His name is Dothard. In the summer of 1978, I interviewed a man who worked as an informer for the FBI during the 1960s. His name is Dothard Perry, also known as Ed Riggs, also known as Bill Perry, also known as Othello. How were you paid?
The pay was always in cash. Cash, and you would sign a card. It would go like this. A rendezvous or a drop-off point would be picked out either by yourself or the agent. You would meet the agent there. Usually it would be in a vehicle. You get in the vehicle, he would hand you the money. He would tell you first to count the money. He would tell you the amount while you counted it. If the amount was there, he would then bring out a card. On that card would be for the week of such and such. In other words, the week was dated. So-and-so has been paid the amount of. Then you would sign the card, and then the agent would sign the card. The reason for this is that if all of a sudden the IRS became very interested about where you were getting all this extra money from, you could always tell them to go back to the Bureau, and the Bureau would have your cards on file.
I see. Were there such things as bonuses?
Oh, yes.
What were they paid for?
Bonuses were paid for, suppose while you were meeting with, or you were at a meeting with Bobby Seals, Chulai of the Red Army happened to come to the meeting too, which is something which would be a new development. That's bonus time.
In other words, a hot piece of information.
Hot piece, very hot piece.
Did you ever suffer pangs of conscience?
Quite a few times. Quite a few times. I still suffer pangs of conscience. I suffer from the fact that a lot of people trusted me and I misused that trust. I suffer from the fact that a lot of information that I gave out was the undoing of certain groups or certain people. I suffer from the fact that I'm on the run constantly. I have no real life to speak of.
You have no family life, really? You have a wife?
No, I don't have a wife. I do have a child. I can't see her that often. I have to stay away from them because once I come around, the Bureau shows up and harassment starts. I have very few close personal friends, no one to really confide in. It's like being on the outside of a glass jar and everything is happening inside the jar, but you're on the outside. You can see it happening, but you can't participate.
Why have you decided to talk to me?
For the simple reason, I think this information should be getting out, should be put out to the public. I think not only Black people, but everyone should become aware of what your so-called law enforcement agencies do to so-called enforce the law. Because between you, myself, and the audience, I've seen more felons in law enforcement than I have in prison.
Many would say, well, look, you yourself just got through saying that the DLA was involved in criminal activity. What's wrong with wanting to put them in prison? How would you answer them?
I would answer them this way. First off, we had to understand why they did what they did. But I'm not even gonna go off into that psychological hoo-ha. What I'm gonna say is, when you become just as bad as the people that you go after, then there's nothing gained and a whole lot lost.
You also were active in the infiltration of many cultural groups. Before we go into that step by step, how much research and study did the FBI engage in of black culture in the late 60s?
A great amount.
Give me an idea.
From the thing is, I can. They have a file on every type of magazine that blacks read. They have a file on the music, dance, theater, actors, comedians, you name it, man.
And they would actually study these different...
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely.
What would they do with music?
To understand the people, you have to understand the culture. To infiltrate, you have to understand. You had a lot of so-called white liberals that were infiltrating the so-called black groups using the information that they had gathered from the studies of blacks.
You mean just to understand the behavior pattern of our people?
Oh, yeah. I can, Will Heaton could name out some jams of Miles Davis that I hadn't even heard of. He could name off some books that I hadn't even read pertaining to black culture.
Do you ever see agents actually studying the music of...
Yes. I've seen them going over even video portion of cultural events. The understanding, like when, you have an organization like Leroy Jones' Black House. You remember that? Okay, Leroy Jones's place, which was done on the thing of tribalism. That's where I first heard the word Kintu, Mantu, Huntu, Hentu. These words of the African continuum. I learned that from an agent. He ran it down to me. They make in-depth studies of the personalities of the people they're dealing with too. Culturally, it always helps when it's the thing of you can take their culture and use it against them.
How large would you say an extensive collection on our culture would you say the FBI has? Would you rate it as large as a particular library, like the Schomburg Library in Harlem? Or...
I would rate it better. And the fact is that they go into details that we probably would overlook. Will Heaton used to meet me in different places. Will Heaton, that was one of my supervising agents. There is a certain bar in the Los Angeles area where people into black cultural things met. And Will Heaton used to meet me there. And he would go into very long and tiring conversations with some very articulate brothers about culture, African culture, and Afro-American culture.
Tell me about some of the cultural organizations that you infiltrated and what you did.
PASLA, Mafunde, Watts Writers Workshop, which they have.
The Watts Writers Workshop?
Yes. Watts Writers Workshop, which was one of the oldest established black writers workshop.
That place was burned down.
Yeah. The Bureau had it burnt down.
How do you know that?
I know because I participated. I did the arson.
You burned down the Watts Writers Workshop?
Yes.
Why did they want it to go?
At the time, funding had been cut to the workshop, had been cut out, but it looked like there was a possibility of a grant being given back to the workshop. And if there was no theater, there would be no grant.
How did you do it?
2 cans of kerosene, Purex bottle, gasoline, and a flare, highway flare.
Why didn't you use more sophisticated stuff?
Oh, no. You're never overly sophisticated. It's too obvious. This way you make it look like, maybe somebody in the neighborhood that got kicked out of theater at one time got mad and came and burned the damn theater up, that kind of thing.
But you were involved in this theater? I mean, did it get to you at all what you were?
Hey, man, that got to me a great deal. I love that theater. I built the stage.
You built the stage?
Oh, yeah. When I got to the workshop, the stage that had been, the original stage that had been built needed an extension on it. The original part of the stage was in terrible condition. They had no lighting system. I put the lighting system in myself. I put the stage in myself. And that was a stage, man. And that was a theater. It's a nice theater.
Who was the director of that workshop?
Harry Dolan.
Harry Dolan. Some very, very well-known artists supported that workshop, gave money to it.
Some very well-known artists came out of the Watts Writers Workshop. You know, Glenn Tubman, Yaphet Kotto. Sidney Poitier used to come down there and give a class. Sammy Davis Jr. used to come down there all the time. Quincy Jones used to come there and give music classes. We had our own 8-track studio setup for sound. We had our own sound room there.
Was part of your other activities and responsibilities to study the profiles of celebrities who were supportive of organizations?
Definitely, and especially, like I said, psychological backgrounds, weaknesses and strengths. Did he have a weakness for blondes? Did he have a weakness for money? Did he snort cocaine? Did he smoke marijuana? They even get into, and that's one thing the Bureau loves is their sexual background. They have files and files on different blacks, not only celebrities, but a lot of others, sexual activity.
What would they do with this information?
Oh, that's used as a weakness.
So they would feed to these weaknesses?
Yes.
Did you see that happen?
Oh, yes. Doc Holliday, who is one of the leaders of the BGF, Black Guerrilla Family, which is a prison gang in the California state prison system. Upon his release from prison, a certain sister made herself known to him at a nightclub, whereupon he moved in with her, and she picked up names, telephone numbers, information, that kind of thing. That lasted for a good 3.5 months.
Was this an unusual thing, or did this happen often?
No, that happens all the time.
Did you yourself get involved in doing that?
Yes.
Give me an example.
There was a gentleman that was on trial in Los Angeles that belonged to the BLA that had been busted in a southern state for a bank robbery, but was brought with 2 other people to Los Angeles to stand trial for the machine gunning of a police officer in Los Angeles. I was supposed to worm my way into the affections of his sister and whatever it took to get the information that I needed as far as what kind of defense they planned to use as to turn this information over to the federal prosecution.
Did you do it?
I got the information, and thank God I didn't have to go through with the actual thing of sexual activity.
What do you mean, thank God?
The sister was rather unappealing.
How did you justify to the organizations in which you had infiltrated yourself that you were living on an $800 a week stipend or on an $800 a week standard of living when most of them were living hand to mouth?
Well, hey, brother, I'm hustling, I mean, hey, man, sell a little of this on the side, little of that on the side, I get over, that kind of thing. In other words, ain't nobody's business but mine where I get the money. So, everybody took it for granted that I was possibly doing a little dealing on the side, that kind of thing. Then also, everybody liked me for the simple reason that I would do things that I didn't have to do. I would go out of my way. Like Mafunde would have a pageant and they needed someone to do the sound setup for him. And I'd say, of course, I'll do it for you. That kind of thing. I was very well liked at one time in the community.
Would you say to American citizens that this situation of surveillance and infiltration continues to this day?
Oh, yes.
On the dimension that you experienced?
Probably much larger by now.
Larger?
Oh, yeah. Let me put it to you like this. Each year, everything gradually escalated up more and more. So I figured when I left, it didn't stop escalating. As they say, one monkey does not stop anybody's show.
You mentioned Sammy Davis Jr., who at one time, it was reported, gave money to the Black Panther Party, I believe. Were you ever assigned to look into that?
Yes, I was told to try to get as close to Mr. Davis or to anyone in his office as I could. I used to go up and have real chit-chat, chummy conversation with his personal secretary, Ann, at the 9000 building on Sunset. And I used to bring a Porter-Pack video camera. And I used to go around and I would videotape the whole office.
You mean celebrities would be coming into his office and you'd film them freely?
Oh, yeah.
Didn't they question that?
I'm from the Ross Writers Workshop. Yeah, right on, brother. That kind of thing. No questions asked. Same thing with the NAACP Image Awards. They were very interested in people like Sammy Davis Jr. There was another black in Los Angeles that they were very interested in because, not Los Angeles, but in Sacramento, Nathaniel Colley, who's attorney for the NAACP. And I know Nat. And they wanted information on him, just for the simple reason that he's an attorney for the NAACP, which makes no sense to me, but must make a lot of sense to them because they use the information.
You've been called upon to testify in Washington. Before who?
Before the Senate committee. I was called first to testify before the church committee. And I did go to Washington, D.C. I did testify to those people. And I want to say right now that the committee was full of smack. They got loads and loads of information and didn't even use it, didn't release it. I had tapes that I offered to them in evidence against the Federal Bureau of Investigation with conversations of me and my supervising officers where he's telling me to obtain certain articles for him by stealing. Don't get fingerprints on it. We can really use that. Did you take the weapons over to such and such? The church's committee told me that they couldn't use the tapes because the tapes were gotten by illegal means.
What would you say about the composition of the committee panel that questioned you?
I can say that's for the birds too, because the same people that I was talking about were the same people on the panel with the church's committee.
What do you mean?
When I came in the room to be interviewed by the so-called people from the church's committee, the representatives from the Federal Bureau of Investigations were also in the room.
FBI agents were a member of the church committee panel.
They were there with the investigators for the church's committee asking questions just like the church's committee. And see, this is another thing that I find fault with, and this is another reason why I am not going to Washington, D.C., is that, again, I have been asked to come again for the second time. I'm not going again for the simple reason that when I went up there with the idea that there were agencies investigating the Federal Bureau of Investigation, not the Federal Bureau of Investigation investigating itself.
You're on the lam, almost. Do you have a sense that you're going to be arrested and go to prison?
Oh, yeah, eventually. Eventually, when things come to a head, it has to. Has to be that way. No other way around it.
What would you say to citizens who sit and listen to what you've said and have a sense of frustration and helplessness.
There are some agents, the old line agents, that disagree with the tactics that were used during the so-called COINTEL period. But one thing I don't want us to jump off of is that people always they're talking about COINTEL now so heavily. I'm not talking about COINTEL. I'm talking about a thing called BD, which was better known as Black Desk. The Black Desk was set up for a simple thing of infiltrating black organizations and black groups, whatever.
Where was this Black Desk, or were there a number of them?
There were a number of Black Desks, but the head Black Desk was in Washington, D.C., controlled by Sullivan. And
Was he black?
No.
Mm-hmm. And what was the function of the Black Desks all over the country? I guess there were dozens.
The function of the Black Desk was to monitor activity, social unrest, revolutionary groups, cultural groups, and such in the black community.
And feed it into this central desk. And it still exists?
As far as I know, yes.
We've seen a number of investigations into the assassination of Martin Luther King. We've seen an extended police trial of the assassination of Malcolm X. What you seem to say substantiates what many black people say out on the street, that government agents or agencies knew that these assassinations were brewing and either participated in them or allowed them to take place.
It would behoove black people, it would behoove all people, really, to question so-called the cut and dry one lone assassin theory. The Bureau and other intelligence agencies are very good at conspiracies. They are very good at setting people up to be killed. They are very good at making innuendos so the person will be killed.
City police don't know about it because they have policemen in there. They don't let black people form anything without some policemen in there. And while I was in the Black Muslim movement, over the Black Muslim movement, many of the police who were sent to infiltrate us, they're black, would tell me, say, look, I'm a cop, but I have to come. They would tell me. I knew the Muslim movement was full of police. So don't you think anything is going down that they don't know about? The only thing that goes down is what they want to go down. And what they don't want to go down, they don't let it go down.
Okay, this is a good one. Let's go
Before we celebrate the freedom most Americans have, we must fight for the freedom all Americans deserve.
Good evening to you. I'm Christine Johnson.
And welcome, everyone. I'm Maurice Dubois. Those stories are straight ahead. But first, after all these years, the Reverend Al Sharpton admits he was an FBI informant.
Yes, he says that he was the cat that got the rats. But others say that Sharpton's secret life was not by choice. CBS 2 political reporter Marcia Kramer has the story.
Michelle Obama probably never knew that one of the guests at her recent White House 50th birthday party was an FBI mafia informant who helped bring down members of the Genovese crime family. Reverend Al Sharpton, now a confidant of both the First Lady and the President and of Mayor Bill de Blasio, has his own unique take on his days as the government's confidential informant number 7.
In my own mind, I was not an informant. I was cooperating with investigations.
The revelations threaten to embarrass Sharpton as he kicks off his National Action Network convention this week with de Blasio and President Obama the headliners. But de Blasio, who calls Sharpton family, is sticking by his buddy.
Doesn't change the relationship one bit. I'm very proud to be his friend. I think he has done a lot of good for the city of New York and for this country. I have the exact same positive view of him I had before.
Sharpton has been dogged for years by reports that he was an FBI informant, helping the government go after boxing promoter Don King and music executives. Now we learn he also went after mobsters, including the legendary Vincent the Chin Gigante, the so-called Oddfather who paraded around in his bathrobe and pajamas. Though he has ducked and dodged questions about whether he wore a wire for the feds, that wasn't possible today since a batch of government documents were made public.
The conversations were recorded.
And there's also the issue of how he became an informant. Some say he was pressured into it after he was caught in a drug sting. This HBO undercover sting video that aired in 2002 shows Sharpton with a cowboy hat pulled down over his bouffant hairdo. Sharpton appears to nod when an agent offers him a cut from future drug sales. But now Sharpton claims he went to the feds for protection from threats from mob-connected music executives and was asked to rat out the bad guys.
They were threatening to kill me.
And while the feds say his information helped bring down guys like Gigante, Sharpton says he didn't know how his information was being used.
I have never met any of these guys. The guy with the pajamas, I don't walk around with guys that walk outside pajamas. I never met these guys.
Well, Sharpton says he's not embarrassed by anything that he did. What he is embarrassed about, he says, is how, quote, fat he used to be now that he has reinvented himself as a skinny guy. By the way, sources say the mayor will cut the ribbon tomorrow at the start of Sharpton's 3-day National Action Network convention. Christina Maurice?
Well, he does definitely look different.
He does.
Yes, Marcia, thank you.
That's crazy. Search it up. Come on.
The star prosecution witness in the trial of 3 young Minnesota terror suspects took the stand late this afternoon.
Prosecutors say he was initially trying to join ISIS, but then in January of 2015, Abdirahman Bashir became an FBI informant. He secretly recorded conversations with the 3 defendants, as well as a number of other young men who have already pleaded guilty in the plot. Esme Murphy was in federal court today. Esme, I know this is a very important witness.
He is the witness for the
Major news today from the world of organized crime. Fox Undercover is confirming that a purported leader of the Boston mob, Mark Rosetti, is also an informant for the FBI. Rosetti is a longtime member of the mob's Boston faction. And in addition to having a long criminal record, Fox Undercover has also learned that he is a suspect in several murders. In his most recent case, state prosecutors are charging him with being the leader of a crew that engaged in crimes, including heroin trafficking, home invasions, and extortion. Prosecutors in that case say they were unaware of Rosetti's relationship with the FBI until a state police wiretap caught him talking to his FBI handler. Well, court papers in that case mention the informant. They don't identify him, though. But those papers show that the informant was caught talking to his handler some 40 times, including conversations about the FBI protecting him from prosecution, the Gardner Museum art heist, and payments from the FBI. The FBI not confirming Rosetti's identity, but said they complied with Justice Department rules requiring they report informants' criminal activity. In a joint statement, the FBI and state police say, quote, the FBI employees responsible for handling this matter did not engage in any inappropriate activity, and that the FBI was prepared to cut off its relationship with the informant, but kept it up so they wouldn't interfere with the state police investigation. But as more information is released, this could prove embarrassing to the FBI in Boston. It's the same bureau that cultivated James Whitey Bulger as an informant. Fox Undercover talked to the head of the state police organized crime unit earlier this year about Rosetti's arrest.
How dangerous of a man is he?
He's probably the most feared guy that was on the street at the time.
So to get him off the street?
It's a good one for us. Bad one for them.
Rosetti's attorney did not return a call seeking comment.
Wow.
Meetings between two law enforcement agencies torn wide open tonight as the controversy about an FBI informant who's also a leader in the New England Mafia intensifies. Two retired state police organized crime investigators are lashing out at the FBI, saying the feds never should have used Mark Rosetti as an informant. Investigative reporter Mike Bodette sat down with the retired detectives this afternoon.
The retired state police detectives I spoke with were both on the front lines of the Whitey Bulger investigation. They lived through the FBI's corruption in the Bulger case, in which Bulger was protected by the feds and ultimately tipped off to his indictment, allowing Bulger to elude capture for years. They hoped that was a thing of the past, but now they say they're not so sure.
There's such mistrust that's built up over the years.
Retired state police detective lieutenants Bob Long and Jack O'Malley are unloading their frustration with the FBI.
I think sometimes the FBI thinks that organized crime is their domain. Stay away from it. We'll handle the organized crime stuff.
The veteran organized crime investigator speaking out after revelations that this man, Mark Rosetti, was a longtime FBI informant. Rosetti was arrested last year after a state investigation, accused of running a highly organized and violent criminal enterprise. This is a bad guy we're talking about.
Oh, yeah. He's one of the worst of the worst. In my tenure there as the commander of the organized crime unit, his name would come up all the time.
Court papers filed last week by defense attorney Bob George reveal state police secretly recorded Rosetti talking to his FBI handler about 40 times. The court documents mention the informant, but do not identify him as Rosetti. Should the FBI have been using Mark Rosetti as an informant?
In my opinion, no. It's a very, very similar case to the Bulger case.
Based on his history of being suspect in many murders and trafficking heroin onto our streets, no way should he have been an informant. They should be out targeting him. You deal up, you don't deal down. In other words, they're going to him for information about who? His subordinates or enemies that might be trying to weasel their way into his organization and take it over. You just don't do it that way.
Why wouldn't you want to use someone like Rosetti as an informant?
Because of his history of violence. And you cannot always know what he's doing.
Fox Undercover also learned state police earlier asked the FBI if Rosetti was an informant, and the FBI said no. No comment from the retired investigators on that, but they keep thinking about the Whitey Bulger case.
It seems to be happening all over again.
Does that surprise you?
It's disappointing.
Disappointing.
The FBI not reacting specifically to what the retired state police investigators are saying, but a spokesperson referred us to a joint press release issued last Friday by the FBI and the state police, in which the FBI says it was prepared to stop using Rosetti as an informant after being notified by the state police about Rosetti's alleged criminal activity, but that the state police asked the FBI to continue the relationship so that Rosetti wouldn't be tipped off.
So, Mike, what's the state police brass saying about these retired guys speaking out?
The brass not too happy. In a statement, state police spokesman David Procopio says, those who have had no involvement with this investigation and who yet still have somehow seen fit to criticize aspects of it fail to acknowledge that no rules were broken and that a dangerous suspect was taken into custody. We make no apologies for the handling of this investigation and our cooperation with the FBI in regard to the intercepted conversations. So some pretty strong words for the retired investigators.
I'll say, what's all this mean for the pending state case against Rosetti?
There are 31 people, Mark, including Rosetti, who have been indicted. The revelation that Rosetti was an FBI informant could absolutely cause problems for the prosecutors. There will be hearings in the coming months to sort it all out.
Fox 25's Mike Bodette. Thanks, Mike.
Alrighty.
Did the FBI allow a prize mob informant to be a heroin dealer? New revelations tonight from Fox Undercover that the FBI was given a chance 20 years ago to make a case against a well-known organized crime figure, but they took a pass.
Well, now that informant is facing a laundry list of new charges, including dealing heroin. Our investigative reporter, Mike Bodette, with the new information.
Mark Rosetti was an up-and-coming mobster in the early 1990s. That's when a state police sergeant named Bill McGreal got a tip that Rosetti was becoming a major heroin dealer in East Boston. McGreal offered the case to the FBI, but it's what happened next that's only now beginning to make sense.
We're not even past the hi, how are you stage when he says, I'm just going to explain something to you. Something goes wrong with this deal. Something's going to go seriously wrong for you guys.
Retired State Police Sergeant Bill McGreal recalling his first encounter with Mark Rosetti. It was 1979. McGreal was working undercover, and Rosetti was an up-and-coming wise guy.
This kid's 21, maybe at the time 22, something like that. And, you know, he's like right out of central casting from The Godfather. I mean, this is like incredible. And I had never dealt with anybody that young that was trying to act so mobbed up.
McGreal says he later bought a small bag of cocaine from Rosetti, but the case never went anywhere. The next day, Rosetti pleaded guilty to assaulting and nearly killing an off-duty state trooper. But it wasn't the last time McGreal encountered Rosetti. More than a decade later, around 1992, a drug user came to McGreal with an offer. He'd go undercover
Guys,
and
I'm
buy
sorry, we
drugs from
gotta
Rosetti.
stop this. I've got a little girl throwing a fit. Needs to go to bed. She's had a long day. I love you guys. I don't want to talk about my past, but it seems like I've run into a bunch of these characters in my lifetime, and I'm really tired of it. And I just want everyone else to protect themselves, because just because they call themselves government doesn't mean they're the good guy. Government can go wrong too. And when you got FBI investigating FBI, you don't get anywhere. One time I had a car wreck, and the same police officer that I was complaining about investigated his own actions. And then he had actually a school person life to him. It's life for him. So, I know they lied. Everyone knows they lied. But, you know, when you got, I don't want to sit there as a teenager calling a grown man a liar, you know. I have since I've been an adult, but not as a 16-year-old. That's ridiculous. And, this is amazing. Keep investigating, guys. Keep researching. And let's finish this.
Exchange for help getting out of jail.
Let's finish this and maybe in a few minutes. All right. Talk to you later. Oh, Mikey mentioned me in a live stream today. You're the best. I'll check it out. I gotta take a break. These kids are about to go to sleep. Maybe I'll see you on them. I'm a mom of 3, so, and actually 4. I have an older lady. Anyway, I don't want to talk about it, but I have a lot of people to take care of. I love you guys. Bye.